In the last video, we talked about how to take your data from the Arduino and make it into a graph that has the basic required components of any good graph, including a title and proper sizing. In this video, we'll talk about how to add trend lines, basic linear trend lines to your data, so that we'll get some quantitative ways of comparing the two lines to each other. Qualitatively, I can tell that the blue cooled off faster than the orange because even though it started at a higher temperature, it eventually reached a lower temperature and remained cooler for the second half of the graph here. But in science, we have to be a little bit more rigorous than that. Was it a significantly more effective heat sink than just the control, or was it a slightly better? We have to have a way to make that measurable. To add trend lines to our graph here, I'm going to first make sure the graph is selected so that I get the additional chart options up here in the ribbon. And under design options, I'm going to go over to trend lines. There's a number of different options there we can choose from, so let's actually not pick one of them. Let's go to the more trend line options, where we'll get a little bit more time to experiment with the trend line that we want. First thing it will ask us is whether we want the with a heatsink line or the without a heatsink line, which is what I named my two series. If you haven't renamed them, it'll probably be Series 1 and Series 2. I'll just go with the first one, which is for my blue data. It gives me a blue linear trend line on there, plus some things I can change about it visually as well as numerically. So I could go in here and make it a different type of trend line, but for right now we're just looking at linear. I could have it show me a few important data points, and the one that I actually want to put on the graph is right down here at the bottom where it says display the equation on the chart for that linear trend line that we just put on there. Sometimes it doesn't put it in a good spot, but you can always move these around so that you know what it's in reference to. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can look at that closer. The equation is y equals some number times x plus some number. So that should jump right out at you as being a slope-intercept form of a linear equation, where this first number is representing the slope and this second number is representing the y-intercept, or where that line is crossing the vertical axis. So it's red under 55, that looks right. The slope, hard to tell if that's an appropriate value, but definitely should be negative because it is going down for the output as the input increases, and that's a negative slope. I can add the second trend line in much the same way by going up to chart options, trend lines again, and now that I know linear is going to work, I'm just going to select it from the list here. I'm going to attach it to the series that didn't already have a trend line for it, and now I need to add the equation as well. So I can make sure that it's looking at that trend line. I clicked on it and it put these little blue bounding boxes on the end, so I know that's the thing that's selected. And in the formatting options here, I'm going to go to the bar graph to get back to the kind of technical aspects. And here we see that trend line does not have its equation on the graph, so I'm going to add that. I'm going to move this one around a little bit so we can take a look at it. And I'm going to move this one down so that it's easier to tell it's for the orange line and this one's for the blue. I think I actually switched those around. This is for the orange line and the first one is for the blue. Now we can compare their values right away. Most importantly, we're interested in the slope value. And I see that this is a larger negative value compared to this one. So that means that it is a steeper line. And those two slope numbers are the things that we really want to compare when we talk about the effectiveness of our heatsink.